Hello everyone. In this video we examine how the sacking of the Constantinople in 1204 and the establishment of the Latin Empire transformed the surrounding region, culturally, economically and politically. Our focus is a period between the sack in 1204 and the Byzantine reconquest in 1261. The Fourth Crusade was originally launched to capture Jerusalem, but it was diverted towards Constantinople after a violent siege. Crusaders entered the city, plundered it, and replaced the Byzantine Empire with the Latin Empire. Lands and revenues were divided between Crusader leaders and Venice through the Partitio Romania, turning the entire Eastern Mediterranean into a political experiment shaped by Western powers. The economic consequences of the sacking of the Constantinople in 1204 were dramatic, and they reshaped the regional trade for decades.
Before the Fourth Crusade, Constantinople was the central commercial hub of the Eastern Mediterranean. But after the city fell and the Latin Empire was created,
economic power shifted away from Byzantine control and toward the Italian maritime republics, especially Venice and Genoa. The Partitio Romania played a major role in this transformation. This agreement divided the former Byzantine lands and revenues between the Crusaders and the Venice. As a result, Venice gained key ports, islands, and trade routes across the Aegean combined with the commercial privileges granted earlier in 1082 Chrysology. Venetian merchants were able to dominate regional shipping and customs. This redirected trade flows and profits that had once passed through Constantinople. At the same time, the sack itself caused enormous damage to the city's economy. Treasure reserves, workshops, religious treasures, and warehouses were looted or destroyed. This weakened Constantinople's ability to function as a financial and trading center under the Latin Empire.
The sack of Constantinople in 1204 triggered some of the most significant political shifts of the Middle Ages. Its impact was immediate, long-lasting, and deeply destabilizing for the region. First, the fall of the city created a massive power vacuum. The unified Byzantine Empire disappeared, and instead the region broke apart into competing states, the Latin Empire in Constantinople, and Byzantine successor states such as Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus. This fragmentation weakened political unity and made coordinated decision-making almost impossible. Second, the new Latin Empire struggled from the beginning. It had no real legitimacy among the local population, it failed to incorporate Orthodox elites, and it faced constant rebellion. Politically, it turned into an unstable and short-lived state that survived barely 57 years. Third, the sack permanently worsened relations between the Catholic West and the Orthodox East. Diplomatic truce collapsed, cooperation broke down, and Christendom became politically divided in a way that would last for centuries. Finally, the weakened Byzantine world opened space for new rising powers. The Seljuks gained ground first, and later the Ottomans expanded into the political vacuum created by the empire's destruction. In the long term, the events of 1204 reshaped the entire balance of power in the Mediterranean and accelerated the shift of political dominance from the east to the west.
When the Crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, the cultural impact on the region was profound. First, the event radically deepened the East-West religious divide. Byzantines had already distrusted Latin Christianity, but the violence of fellow Christians entering the city, desecrating churches, and imposing their own clergy transformed this distrust into a permanent cultural barrier. Byzantine writers described Latins as culturally barbaric and religiously illegitimate, and this language intensified after the city was retaken in 1261. The trauma of 1204 became a foundational memory that helped Byzantines define themselves more sharply as a distinct people, Orthodox, civilized, and fundamentally different from the Latin world. In this sense, the sect did not only divide two Christian traditions, it strengthened Byzantine identity itself. A second major cultural consequence was the massive destruction and displacement of Greek art, literature, and ancient heritage. Countless statues, monuments, mosaics, relics, and manuscripts were destroyed, melted down to mint coins, or carried off to Western Europe. And here is an astonishingly realistic depiction of a crusader in action.
Melt.
Contemporary Byzantine authors like Niketas Choniates mourned this as a cultural catastrophe that ruptured the continuity of Greek civilization. And ironically, this cultural loss for Byzantium became a cultural gain for the West. The artworks and manuscripts transported to Venice or other Latin cities helped stimulate Western artistic development and contributed to the earliest rise of humanistic learning. It was a one-way culture transfer where the West benefited from the Byzantium lost. Here we can also see this charming crusader during the process of cultural transfer.